Hello everybody, my name is Run, and welcome to Create a Mechanic, in which I'll be showing you how to create mechanics that you might find in old school RPGs, or just mechanics we've made up on our own. This is a tutorial series directed at beginners, so there won't be any scripting, there will most likely not be any script calls. Everything will be done through eventing so that everyone can follow along, learn, and do it themselves. We may get into some more advanced stuff later on, but for right now, we're going to try to keep it as simple as we possibly can. Well, simple depending on what your definition of simple is. Eventing can get a little bit complex if you're new to the engine. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a switch puzzle, and what I mean by a switch puzzle is this. As you can see, we've got 9 switches here and a door. The goal is to press all of the switches in order to get the door open. Now, the catch is that when you press one switch, every switch that surrounds it will also be pressed, like this. As you can see, the switch to the right and the switch below also got pressed. Same with this switch. Same with this switch. Same with all of them. Okay, so if we press this middle one, all of these come up. Now we grab this. We grab this, and as you can see, the door is open. Now I'm going to go step by step so that it's an easy process to follow. And by the end of this, you will have your own switch puzzle and the knowledge to make a much larger switch puzzle if you'd like. Before we get started, if you like this sort of content, please leave me a like and a comment down below. Let me know what mechanics you'd like to see from classic RPGs, or if you have a mechanic in mind that you'd like to see me try to create through strictly eventing. I'd love to hear it. Step 1 is to create your door. So let's grab an empty tile here. We're going to name this event door. And let's find a door graphic. I like the gates. I think the gates are like nice, big, giant, ominous doors. This kind of blends in with the gray tile set we have here. So we're going to choose this graphic. You don't have to touch anything else on this event page for right now. Just press OK. Step 2 is to create your switches. Now we're going to start with the middle switch, and it'll be a bit of an advanced tip, but I'm going to show you why. So let's call this switch 5. The reason that we call this switch 5 is if you go back to the one I've already created here, if you look at it in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Similar to a number pad. It makes it easy to remember and keep track of which switches are which. So this one in the middle is going to be switch 5. Now let's find an image for the switch. I'm partial to these buttons, so let's go ahead and use these. You want the unpressed image first. Now we're going to put a comment at the top here, and in this comment, we're going to do this for every switch. I want you to put which switches this switch affects. Okay, so for example, let's go back to our graphic here. Switch 5 will affect switch 2, switch 4, switch 6, and switch 8. So we're going to go here. We're going to create a comment. We're going to type in switch 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, now you don't have to do this, but this is a nice little helpful hint when you're trying to remember which switches this particular switch you're creating affects, instead of having to press OK and look around each time. You just have it there at the top of your event as a little reminder. Next, what I want you to do is create a new event and control switches. Go into your switch menu here, and I want you to create 9 switches. Now, you don't have to name them exactly as I have here, but if you put them in order with a little identifier at the front, it's easier to keep track of when you create multiple puzzles in your game. For instance, I have P1, which stands for Puzzle 1. Once you have these 9 switches created, you want to choose switch 5 pressed. The reason that we named them pressed is that it's easy to tell if switch 5 pressed is on, that means switch 5 is pressed. If switch 5 pressed is off, switch 5 is off. So choose switch 5 pressed here. Turn it on. Okay. Now when we interact with this switch, it's going to turn switch 5 pressed on. Create a new page. Go to your switch graphic once again, but this time we are going to choose the fully pressed version. And for conditions here, you want to choose switch and then if switch 5 is pressed. Now what's going to happen is if we interact with the switch here, it's going to turn switch 5 pressed on, which will activate this page, which shows the button as being pressed. Well, I guess switch as being pressed. Now, before we leave our event page here, we're going to go ahead and set up the conditional branches that check to see if the surrounding switches are pressed or depressed, and change them whenever this button is pressed. As we commented up above, the first switch it'll affect is switch 2, so let's start a new event. Hit conditional branch, change this to if switch 2 is pressed, and then also create an else branch. Make sure this is set to on. Now what this is asking is, what do you want to do if switch 2 is pressed when you press this switch? So if switch 2 is already pressed, we want it to depress the switch, right? So we're going to go to control switches, we're going to go to switch 2 pressed, and we're going to turn that off. And if switch 2 is not pressed, which is our else branch, we're going to take this same switch and we're instead going to turn it on. Now before we go any farther, let's explain this. When you press switch 5, it's going to turn switch 5 pressed on, which activates its pressed graphic. And it's also going to check, is switch 2 on? If switch 2 is on, turn it off. If switch 2 is not on, turn it on. Now I guess you could consider this like an intermediate tip, but instead of creating new events every time you want to do something, it's much easier, at least in my opinion, to copy this conditional branch. And since we have 3 other switches we have to account for, I want you to paste it 1, 2, 3 times. I'll show you why. So the next switch that we want to be affected is switch 4. So in our second conditional branch, we're going to go into edit it, so press the spacebar. And instead of switch 2 pressed, we're going to change it to switch 4 pressed. Make sure that inside your if and else statement, you also change those to switch 4 pressed. Luckily, the cursor stays on the last switch you chose, so that makes it a little bit faster. And now our condition for switch 4 is already done. We didn't have to create a new event, create these new events. It was copy pasted. All we had to do was change the switch. I'm a big fan of copy pasting both events and event contents because it makes your workflow much faster. Maybe faster is the wrong word. Much more efficient. All right, the third switch we need to affect is switch 6. So let's go down to our third conditional branch here. Spacebar to edit and change this to switch 6 pressed. Same thing, make sure you go inside the if and else statements as well to change these events to switch 6. All right, and the final switch we needed to affect is switch 8. Let's go into our last conditional branch here, space bar again to edit, and change this to switch 8 pressed. Once again, final time I'll tell you, make sure you change these to switch 8 inside your if and else statement. All right, and now you've got a button that when you press it, it's going to turn on its pressed graphic by turning switch 5 pressed on, which is right here. Then it's going to check switch 2, 4, 6, and 8 and flip them to whatever they are not. So if they're on, it'll turn them off. If they're off, it'll turn them on. Now before we go, let's add a little flair. We'll make a nice little sound for when the switch is pressed. So right before control switches, hit new. And we are going to play a sound effect. Do we have a... Not sure what oh, here we go, switch. That's not bad. All right, and press OK. Now, when you press the switch, it'll make a nice little satisfying noise. And I believe we are good to go for switch 5. Probably thinking to yourself, Run, why did we start with switch 5? Remember how I told you about copy and pasting your events and event contents? Switch 5 needs to check and affect more switches than any other switch. For instance, switch 2 only affects these 3. Switch 6 only affects these 3. Now, since we've made switch 5, all we have to do is copy and paste the rest of our switches, and we will only have to change or delete instead of create new event contents. So let's copy this, and we're gonna go and we are going to paste these. Make a nice little number pad style shape here. Now, these will all say switch 5 on the left. That's okay. We're gonna change that, don't worry. Now, I'm gonna show you how to change the first couple of switches, but then after that, I'm gonna allow you to do the rest of them by yourself. And then I will do a quick run through to show you what they look like so you can compare to make sure that your events match my events. So let's start with switch 1. Let's edit the event here. First of all, change your name to switch 1 so you're not confused. Let's go to the comment. Now switch 1 will affect switch 2 and switch 4. So we're going to change this comment, not create a new event, change this comment. Going to affect switch 2, oh, and switch 4. I didn't even have to delete that. I should have just, yeah, anyways. So now, since it's only affecting 2 switches, we can get rid of the last 2 conditional branches. So delete and delete. And guess what? Because we did switch 5 first, the conditions for switch 2 and switch 4 are already here. All we have to do is change the control switches here, which is what will change the graphic, to switch 1. And then on our second page, change the condition switch to switch 1. Ta-da! And now switch 1 is done. Next, let's go into switch 2. So first, let's change the name to switch 2. We're gonna edit this. Let's move this over for a second. So switch 2 will affect 1, 3, and 5. So let's edit this to say 1, 3, and 5. Now we want to change the switch that it turns on by pressing it to switch 2. And since we only need it to affect 3 switches, we can get rid of the 4th conditional branch. Now this one is not going to be as quick and easy as the last one. Since it has to affect different switches than are already here, we need to go in and edit these to the switches that it affects. I feel like I'm saying switch a lot. So in the first conditional branch, we're going to change switch 2 to switch 1, which is the first switch that switch 2 will be affecting. Go into here, make sure you change it under your if and else statements as well, or you will experience catastrophic results. All right, first conditional branch is done. Now we do the second one, which will affect switch 3. Change this, switch 3, or you change it in your branches. Okay, and the final one is switch 5. Switch 5, your branches. All right, and then on your second page, make sure you change the condition switch to switch 2. All right, and switch 2 is done. Now, I'm sure you can guess, but the remaining switches will go through the exact same process. I'll go ahead and do switch 3 with you as well, just to be safe. First, let's change the name to switch 3. I'm so used to clicking OK. I almost clicked OK. Go into your comment. Now switch 3 will affect switch 2 and switch 6. And guess what? 2 and 6 are already in this one. Change the switch that it turns on to switch 3. And since it only needs to affect 2 other switches, we can delete 2 conditional branches, but since we have 2 and 6 right here, let's delete 4 and 8. Right, almost done. Make sure you go to your second page, change the condition switch to switch 3. And now you're done. It's that simple. So go ahead and pause the video here. I won't go through the rest of these just yet. See if you can knock them out for yourself. And when you come back, I'll be showing you the event list for each of these so that you can check your work. All right, hopefully you were able to get your buttons situated here. Buttons? Why do I keep saying buttons? Switches. Hopefully you were able to get your switches situated there. Before I show you what I have, I want to make sure that I did it correctly. So we're going to play test this real quick. All right, let's start here and we're just going to start pressing random buttons. I have a base solution figured out, but right now I'm just kind of keeping my eye on everything, making sure everything's changing and being affected as it should. And it looks like, see, we've got an issue here. Always play test. I am gonna fix that real quick. I have now fixed it, so let's interact. There we go. Now it's changing. All right. It looks like everything's working exactly as intended. Now I'm going to show you what I have for each of these event pages. You can pause the video at any point so that you can check it out, but we've already gone over the first 3 and we started with switch 5, so I'm going to show you the remaining switches. Here is what I have for switch 4. Switch 4 affects switches 1, 5, and 7. Here's your event list. And here's what page 2 looks like if you need to see the switch condition. Feel free to pause this at any point. Here's switch 6. Switch 6 affects 3, 5, and 7. Here's the event list here. And here's what page 2 looks like. Okay, let's move on to switch 7. Here is the contents for switch 7. Switch 7 affects switch 4 and switch 8. Here's the second page if you need to see it. Switch 8 affects 5, 7, and 9. Here's your event list here. And here's page 2. And finally, switch 9. Switch 9 affects 6 and 8. Here's the event list. And here's page 2. Okay, now for the final step. We need to set up our door so that something happens when all of the switches are on. There are 2 ways to do this. One is the simpler way, which I'll be showing you first. The second is a more advanced way that I'll be showing you a little bit later. So let's go into our door here. Now before we do anything, I want you to change the trigger to parallel process. What a parallel process does is constantly runs through this series of events, but also allows other events to run. If it were an auto run event, it would constantly run, but not allow other events to run. So we're gonna keep this to parallel process so that I can always check to see if all of the buttons have been pressed. Now in our event contents, we want to create a conditional branch. If switch 1 is pressed on, go ahead and press OK. Inside that, you don't have to create an else branch. Inside of that conditional branch, if switch 1 pressed is on, we're going to create another conditional branch. If switch 2 pressed is on, press OK. Inside of that one, we're going to create another conditional branch if switch 3 is pressed. And I'm sure by now you kind of get the gist where we're going. You want to make sure you have it all the way down to switch 9. So keep making those conditional branches inside of each other like that. We're on switch 7 here. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Additional branch, switch 8. Now there is a much more what I would call efficient way to do this that doesn't look like this. If this bothers you, I'll show you that here in just a few moments. But if all of these switches are on, and remember, it's going to be constantly checking this. We want to, well, let's play a little sound effect. We want to play a sound effect. I think there's a door in here somewhere. Let's just do that, door 1, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to control self switch A on. Now, what does turning self switch A on do? We are about to create it. So go to a new event page. For the conditions for that event page, make sure self switch A has to be on. And now we're going to change the door graphic to have the door open. And there we go. It's now set to action button. Make sure you do not set this one to parallel process. Make sure it's set to the action button. And in here, you can put a transfer event if you need to have them change maps or whatever. You don't have to worry too much about what you put in here. Just make sure that it is a way for, you know, the character to get out or do what doors normally do in your game. So just to recap, what this is going to do is constantly check to see if each of these switches is on. Now, it will only check if switch 9 is on if all of these other switches are on. And what this means is all of these have to be pressed in order for this action to happen, which will play the door opening sound effect, turn the self switch on, and open the door. Remember what I said about playtesting? Always, always playtest. Let's do that right now. All right, here we are with our puzzle here. So we're going to start here. I've already got kind of a default way that I solve it just for speed's sake. Here's the moment of truth. Oh my gosh, we did it. We opened the magic door. That sounded so corny. Okay, anyways, as you can see, the door is open. Now, I did mention that there's a more efficient way to do this. I won't do the entire thing here. Perhaps we can go over that in a short video for YouTube. I do a lot of tip videos, so definitely check out the YouTube shorts as well as TikTok. It's Run the MC everywhere. We'll get into how to use variables maybe in one of those short videos. But instead of having all of this, you could delete all of this, create one conditional branch, change it to variable, create a variable, something called like switches pressed, and if that is equal to 9, then you play your door sound effect and you turn your self switch on. Now, how do you get the variables to 9, you might ask? I will show you. So, in each of these, whenever we turn a switch on, you want to add 1 to your switches variable. Okay, switches pressed variable. So let's create a new event here. Control variables, switches pressed, and we're going to add 1. Okay, we want to do that for every time a switch gets turned on. So we're going to copy this, and since the switch gets turned on down here, we're going to paste it, and then we're also going to paste it down here, since this also gets turned on. When a switch gets turned off, you want to control variable, but you want to subtract 1. Okay, so every time a variable gets or a button gets turned off, you want to subtract 1. Now, if you do this for all of your switches, then the door will open and you only have this little bit of code in your door here. Now, one way is not necessarily better than the others, but I've talked in the past about, switch bloat and how I hate switch bloat. It feels like it gets out of control. The tools for like reorganizing and managing switches aren't great in RPG Maker. So I prefer to use variables whenever possible. All right, you all, I think that just about wraps it up for the first of a series that I hope will continue called Create a Mechanic. In the next video, I think what we're gonna do is map skills. And what I mean by map skills is something like, if you've ever played Golden Sun, there would be these like big tree kind of logs or stumps that you could only move, excuse me, when you use a skill, and the skill would show up on the map, and it would physically move the tree. Something along those lines, or maybe something like HMs in Pokemon, where you can only do certain things, go on certain terrain if you have certain skills, stuff like that. So as the series goes on, I will try to teach you more and more advanced tips, like the thing with the variables. Maybe on the next video, we'll actually go through and use something like variables instead of switches, as well as like the copy and paste thing that I told you about that helps your workflow become more efficient. Once again, if you guys like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit the like button, subscribe if you want more RPG Maker content, specifically more Create a Mechanic videos. Also down in the comments, if you all have any ideas of other mechanics that we could possibly make in RPG Maker without scripting, through strictly eventing, because I'd like to keep it beginner friendly, please let me know. They could be mechanics from old Final Fantasy games, you know, Super Nintendo RPGs, action games, really anything you can think of, or mechanics that you come up with on your own. If there is a simple beginner friendly way for me to create it, I will definitely create it. And maybe it doesn't even have to be beginner. Rewind. Maybe it doesn't even have to be beginner. We can get into more advanced stuff as the series goes. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, bye!